All right, so here we have the default ranges. I again want to just really emphasize how much this can change from person to person. So we're going to flat all of the suited strong hands we 3-bet. We're going to just flat those against 4-bet. They're generally going to have enough equity against the value/bluff range of your opponent. They tend to do much better post-flop. Flush draws obviously help you out a lot. So we're usually going to be a little more on the conservative side here on some of the offsuit and pair hands. But these strong suited Broadway type hands they're really the core of your flatting a 4-bet range. They're going to offer you a lot of good playability across different boards. You're going to be able to hit a good chunk of top pairs. And it also blocks your opponent from having some strong hands. So I'd say those are generally the strongest hands. I think the middle pocket pairs are really awkward. I know I have them in the call range here. I kind of hate that. I have jam flat here. What is going on? I kind of hate that because the thing about it is if you flat them, then your opponent gets to realize equity with their bluffs, but they also make not that great of jams because you tend to block the kinds of hands that are going to fold to jam and don't block any of the value bets. So I would say with those, the world's your oyster. You can't fold. So you have to either call or jam. I think they're both fine, maybe based on 4-bet frequency. I'd say if your opponent's 4-betting more than about 5, well, let me actually rephrase that. If your opponent's 4-betting more than 6 to 7% of all hands, then they're definitely jams. If they're in the 5 to 6% range, maybe you want to go for a call. And if they're under 5%, I would definitely go for a call. You want to take into consideration the overall 4-bet frequency of your opponent. But those hands suck against 4-bet, which, and by the way, we're not going to mainly have 7s, I think, as a 3-bet. I lean generally more towards calling it. This is versus loose players. And 8s, I'm generally 3-betting, so that we will have quite often. But either call or jam are both okay. I maybe even mix between the two is a good strategy. The offsuit Broadways we have here, I just realized that we are looking at the wrong thing. The offsuit Broadways, Ace, Jack, and King, Queen. Now, those hands are kind of like the middling pairs, but I actually am a lot more happy with them as jams. Because King, Queen, for example, you block way less bluffs. Usually Ace, X hands tend to be the bluffs, but you very much block value. Ace, King, Ace, Queen, King, King, Queen, Queen. A lot of these, a lot of the value bets you block. So one of the first hands I like to start 3-betting as a 3-betting looking to 5-bet jam is King, Queen. I think it's actually a pretty good hand to have in that range. And Ace, Jack would then be second. So I don't mind putting those in there at all. If my opponent starts to 4-bet bluff too much, if they start to 4-bet too much in total frequency, I definitely like putting those hands in. And they're actually going to perform okay when they're called. I mean, look, it's not a good situation, but they're going to have 35, 38% equity when you do get called. So I would say versus a lot of opponents, I jam them. Versus the more conservative players, I flat them. Again, these hands are not going to be folded to 4-bet. Now, the hands that really go back and forth based on the bet size are the very low suited hands. You're going to call versus usually like a 2x sized 4-bet. The suited 1-gapped low suited hands, you're generally going to call somewhere around 2.3x, maybe 2.5x. And then as it gets to be more like a 3x, you're going to definitely look to take out a bunch of these and make the range a little more like this or something. Something like that. So as far as aces and kings go, we're going to talk about trapping again. I do like trapping a bit more in the 4-bet pots. I think it makes a little bit more sense. The pot's already so large that it makes more sense compared to facing a 3-bet. And specifically with aces, I don't mind maybe mixing it in half the time calling the 4-bet, half the time jamming, because that way you still have that value in your 5-bet range, but you also protect your range a bit on the flat. Kings, kind of like how I said versus 3-bet, I like trapping it less. So really maybe flatting kings a fourth of the time. The main thing to just realize with kings is that there's a lot less value in trapping it because there are ace-high boards. Those are a thing. So aces doesn't suffer from that one overcard spot where now they might not be able to play for all the money, whereas kings definitely does. So look to trap aces more than kings. Probably still look to mainly 5-bet both of them, but work in traps with those hands. If your opponent main 4-bets you, you're going to have to take flops with hands like 6-2 suited and stuff. And I know that sucks. It sucks having to call with such bad hands. But pot odds are a thing, and you just flop flush draws and pairs now to continue. So don't get too nitty when you're facing 4-bets. Remember that pot odds and just being able to hit flops just directly, it's going to be enough to make those profitable. And also post-flop, be aware of what your flat 4-bet range is. I always say visualize your range. Visualize your range. Pull it up. Know what it is. Because what hands you bluff post-flop is going to be way different than if your call 4-bet hand range looks like this than if it looks like this. It's going to be way different. Like a hand like 9-7 suited, you might not be able to bluff because you have so many other worse hands. Whereas, if it's a big 4-bet, you might have to find places to try and bluff with 8-7 suited because it's so far down. It's one of your worst hands you can have. So be aware of this. Always keep in mind the math on jamming. If you want to mix in some strategies with like the offsuit broadways to jam part of the time, that's fine. Basically, the main thing to take away here is you should be aiming for around a 40% fold, around a 40% call, and around a 20% jam, and then making some decisions based around what your opponents are doing.